Happy Friday morning, everybody. Got a good show coming up in our latest Trade to Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Deals. Thanks for checking in. Big guest on here this morning. We have CNBC's host of Fast Money, Tim Seymour, going to join us in just a moment to talk everything about rescheduling, the Trump administration, what he thinks the market will perform on the macro level as well. We'll answer some questions about public opinion regarding his ETF CNBS and obviously the liquidation of MJUS last month. So we'll clear some of that stuff up in just a moment as well. A few other things, but keep taking a look at Aurora Cannabis that has the short squeeze going on. But there's some other players in the psychedelic space, including Psychedelic ETF, PSIL, along with MindMed and Atai, and how they've been performing this week, as Dan from the Chart Guys is going to be hopping on with us as well. So with that action-packed show here on a Friday morning, let's welcome in AV. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Busy week. So it's nice to wrap it up in this fashion.
Well, it's nice to see some of the verticals that we cover where we see some price action, because I know it's been a lot of reform talk and we will continue on that narrative. However, it's nice to add into some of our discussion is stocks that actually are moving. But you brought up TerrAscend as well before we went live here, but it's had a nice little showing since they announced their pre-earnings. But all in all, it's nice to see finally we can talk about some things related to price, right?
Yeah, it's good. Thanks to the TerrAscend team for putting out that pre-announce. I mean, that kind of got me back into the market, picked up a position. It's gone from 55 to above 70 since they pre-announced. I mean, like I had said, I was pretty vocal. I had my hesitations about the name with Michigan as well as New Jersey. They showed relative strength in those markets. Obviously, we'll get a deeper dive when the true report comes out, but it's had some momentum since. So I'm excited.
Yes. AV and Plaid, right, Squap? Yes, he is as well. Eric, good morning. Good to see you as well. Jungle Java, hello. Good to see you. And with that, let's say hello to our first guest. He's the host of CNBC's Fast Money and the chief investment officer of Seymour Asset Management and their ETF CNBS. Back to the podcast. It's been a while. Tim Seymour, good to see you. How are things?
It's just saving myself for you guys. It's great to be here, Chad and AV. Nice to be here, and never a dull moment.
Love the way you put those things. What have you been up to lately?
Yeah, it's been busy. Obviously, broader markets keep us busy. I also run an international ETF, IDVO, and that's the focus on international has been interesting year to date too, right? You've actually seen markets around the world outperforming the U.S., whether their macro is better or not. So international has been interesting. Cannabis has a ton of news flow.
Yeah.
And obviously just trying to figure out how to listen to some music, have some fun. Baseball season's on the horizon.
There you
Good
go.
stuff.
Yeah. Pete Alonso signs with the Mets in a 2-year deal. I don't know if that was what he was hoping for as he entered into off season, but you know what? It's reality now.
We'll take it. Yeah, we'll take it. I mean, he like the Scott Boras factor.
Yes.
Seems like it's losing its edge, and he turned down people that have followed this one. He turned down a 7-year deal for $158 million last year. He's not going to get near that.
Ugh.
As a Met fan, I'm thrilled he's back for a year. He's certainly a guy that, in terms of how he carries himself and what he's done for the team for the last 4 or 5 years, has been amazing. I love the guy. Fans are happy. They were kind of ready that he was not coming back, and they were going to be okay with it. They were going to be sad, but this is we'll take him for a year and see what happens.
Might need to talk to the bank of Juan Soto after this off season, but man, what a contract. But you were talking about international. Those were some impressive numbers, I think, with the international numbers that, looking at a blast in the past, but Aurora Cannabis caught, I think, a little bit of people who I surprised. Did you get a chance to see some of those numbers?
Yeah, I did. I mean, there's my view more broadly on what's going on outside the U.S. in cannabis markets is somewhat tempered by the practical reality of the investable themes around that. But Aurora is not a name I own. It's not a name I've owned forever.
Yeah,
if ever. And yeah, I mean, I understand what the trends are for Canadian exports, especially into Germany, and those headlines are great. Whether they're things to really, I think, be making fresh investment calls on, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I hear you.
How are you feeling about the U.S.? I mean, we go back years now, but we've talked about the U.S. We've seen the U.S. develop. How are you feeling about the U.S. right now in the current state of the industry with what you're seeing from, let's say, a financial engineering perspective? I mean, you thoroughly understand leverage and the balance sheet with your investing experience And I mean, how are you looking at it, especially under the lens of current, we could get some reform under the Trump administration?
Yeah, I think investing with an eye on balance sheets and capital structure in cannabis is critical. I think the world that we've seen over the last 5 to 7 years has meant any time you have an opportunity to raise capital efficiently, that's all relative. And again, it's all relative cost of capital. You do that as a cannabis company. Anytime you expect there to be a legislative follow through that's going to lower that cost of capital, change your tax structure. Don't hold your breath. So I don't ever invest based upon what I think is going to happen in Washington. I do think that there's a sense here that there are some companies that are structurally, asset wise and balance sheet wise in a better position than others, obviously. And then there are those that were probably a little too, we're counting on rescheduling to change at least, real free cash flow from operations. So, we've all followed the soap opera around rescheduling. It's hard to feel that we're, any closer, other than the process is I think, proven something, unless you believe that essentially the FDA, report around efficacy and medical efficacy, it was a charade. I don't. And therefore, I think there's a real foundation for rescheduling. We all know new sheriff in town, Derek Maltz, hard to feel good about that one.
Yeah.
In terms of where this is going. But I don't know that he's really the appointee. We don't know. And we also know that the outgoing DEA head wasn't really a fan either. So you guys spend so much time drilling into this stuff that I think, we're all aware of the different pieces of how we've come to where we are. I think it is important to try to have a fresh outlook on a new administration, because you can't do any worse than the last administration did for cannabis, especially with the mandate that they had. And it was. I'm not political on CNBC. I'm not being political here, but I mean, it's kind of sad that the mandate that was there was really used as a political stool, and we're the political tools. So a fresh start's a good thing here. And obviously, if you think about what a great mandate meant 4 years ago on February, I mean, is it to the day 5 years ago 4 years ago, excuse me, the cannabis markets hit their peak? I think it was. I think we're talking on the day, it was February 7th or 8th, 2021. Georgia runoff gives you a few days of crescendo, and that was it. It's kind of a sad anniversary. Therefore, isn't the opposite true? You have to take some, your glass has to go half full on the half empty thing here. Nobody's expecting anything. Back to the macro that really matters for the industry right now. That's you can look at, you can assess. I mean, everything from deflation prices and deflation in places, some of the most important markets like Florida is shocking year over year. Yet markets like Illinois are really holding up in terms of wholesale prices, north of whatever, $2,200, $2,300. Places like New Jersey finally coming around, New York finally coming around. So you have to pick different spots here, and ultimately as an investor, you have to figure out what are the investable themes that actually you can tie to those. And one more thing just on the macro that I think is real now and is different and is still unclear, of course, because it's cannabis, but hemp-derived THC is a big deal. It's a big deal for the industry, and it's a big deal. Obviously, a handful of companies have made significant investments or put structures together to play with this. I actually sit on the board of Cheech and Chong's Cannabis, and I argue they have maybe one of the few real brands in cannabis. And these guys have just done a great job of partnering with people on hemp-derived beverages at festivals, and also, finding space in C-stores. And I just kind of know more from the trenches there, what's going on in the space. You guys know what the the opportunity here is, and where this allows some of the big picture stuff we all got excited about with cannabis and brands to really start to happen. And by the way, as I probably have said every other time I've been on the show, like the reason I drink Coors Light is because I can have 9 of them when I go to a Mets game, and kids don't try that at home, but and still be largely okay. I mean, I think the hemp-derived THC thing, I won't get into, judging, quality and comparing it to some of the best flower brands in the world, but for a lot of people and for the masses and the things that are going to move the needle in cannabis, like this is kind of the story.
Yeah,
it is.
So
it is. I've been bullish on I've been bullish on beverages for years, and a couple years, probably 18 to 24 months ago on the podcast, the comments would light up. You're crazy. Beverage is not going to be it. Beverage is a tiny category. Doesn't matter. Well, I was kind of right because it took a different form, but I think the low dose THC beverages are the best form factor, period. They're sessionable. They're dosable. Americans love to drink. And under the hemp guys, it is legal federally. Yeah. I was talking to someone yesterday in Florida that's a sophisticated operator, and unbeknownst to me, there are vertical operations in the state of Florida for THCA flower. There are sophisticated cultivators that are cultivating THCA flower with sophisticated retail operations that apparently are going gangbusters, and they're converting people from the medical market. That is a big threat to the Florida MMTCs, just anecdotally. And I mean, from a firsthand account, you're in New York. Have you seen the true retraction in these dispensaries in Manhattan with the operations that have been going on in New York?
Yeah, I think there's been some really positive things happening in terms of enforcement and also, so where people that have real businesses. It's actually really funny because when I go down to Fast Money for CNBC every day, it's right at the NASDAQ, and I take a car down and I kind of right through the belly of the Times Square beast, and there's a cannabis dispensary right there on 40, I think 6th and 7th, maybe it's 45th, and it's massive, and it's got a real Times Square billboard to it, and some lights and some flash, and it's everything that I expected at one point would be a big deal in New York with cannabis, and where I still think it's going to go. So I live on the Upper West Side, where it seemed like every other storefront that used to sell newspapers was selling weed illegally, and that has changed a bit. It really has, and it's slowly changing. So we don't have enough time to get into the illicit market and also what's going on there, but that's obviously one of the biggest existential threats to this industry. And as much as people want to compare it to back in the day, people were making gin in their bathtub. It's like people weren't really doing that. I mean, they were doing it, but the illicit market is so different in cannabis, and it really is a threat that needs some of the stuff in DC. Whenever it happens, it's actually going to be, the pump will already have been primed for other parts of the industry that will have already been doing well, and it's only going to help even more. I mean, the illicit market is never going away, but it will go away in the form it's in today. It will. I'm sure of it. When people can have real products to go down to its stores, and again, microdose, and it becomes a little bit more of just this evolution of the destigmatization of cannabis, period. But right now, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Tim, what year did you start investing in cannabis? Do you remember?
Probably 2016, like really in full force. But I've been kind of dancing around it before. As you guys, I think remember, I'm an emerging markets guy by background, so I was always kind of fascinated by cannabis and what was going on, and so and really some of my earlier deep dives were one of my friends from Russia was tasked to work with the guys at MedRelief and then Tikkun Olam. So all of that Israeli cannabis medical science stuff. And I got really involved with those guys and the Tikkun Olam US entity, which hasn't fared well. But in terms of the background and all that, that's really when I got involved. Because a good friend of mine who was an emerging markets guy too, got very involved in, really, maybe the leading brand coming out of Israel as they were doing what they were doing in Canada. So that was kind of my first early days.
Yeah. When you
How-
go ahead.
Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, you fast forward 9 years, like we're all, I guess, surprised, disappointed in how long this has played out. And we saw a great opportunity when it came to share prices and whatnot back in the 2016, 17, and 18 era up in Canada. Do you believe, and I know this is a lot of what ifs, but if the US does get its act together when it comes to reform, like where does this industry go? Do you still think that there's great upside potential for this space? Like, I think a lot of people are just frustrated because they keep hearing the same sentiment over and over that you got to wait, you got to be patient, you can just be hopeful. But here we are in 2025 and still classified as a Schedule 1 drug and no banking opportunities for US companies.
I'm very confident in the thesis we all have, which is growing addressable market, real use case, clearly trends that we are so much smaller than as they relate to just what our people who are, you guys are younger than me, not a lot. Well, Anthony might be, I don't know. I don't even care. The point is, like, if you're 30 right now, and God forbid if you're 20, like you're, I mean, cannabis is at least, whether you're choosing to have a beer, a glass of wine, a shot of something, or cannabis, or certainly some of the whether it's ketamine or, like, the world's just so different on this front. And the good news is that I think people are living in a way that's more healthful. I think people have a mind on the big picture. And more importantly, I think people are a lot more in touch with what works and what doesn't work for them.
Yes.
So sorry for that rant. It's just, that's why cannabis is got, a lot of runway, and there's going to be different ways. And, my ETF is going to have different exposures to different things, hopefully 10 years from now, because it's going to continue to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
I think we don't know where the industry should trade on a multiple. I can't, CPG, if we all had a nickel, every time you heard this industry compared to that, you'd be retired. I mean, it's kind of a joke because, unfortunately, in CPG, what makes CPG what it is there are very predictable multiples and ratios and profitability metrics that at least are comparable, apples to apples, or comparing subsectors within that. We have no idea where cannabis is supposed to trade in terms of a margin profile. And I heard you talking about TerraSend, and that's great. And I agree, those are nice numbers. Their gross margin improved 150 bips. Like, these are things we can actually quarter to quarter really focus in on the companies that are executing, and that's good. But I don't even know where the industry is supposed to trade. And that's kind of the problem. And when I talk to guys outside of the industry who are, some of my former, hedge fund colleagues and this and that, they say a lot of the same stuff, which is that, I'm not terribly impressed by the top line. I'm not terribly impressed by the margin profile.
With those conversations, how much do you think those conversations will evolve when 280, if and when 280E goes away and these shenanigans on the balance sheet are done with? We can actually see a black and white picture of the financial health of these businesses, and there's no more, let's say, tax liability siloed on the balance sheet. You can actually see a true image of the top and bottom line and the margins. I don't want to call them normalized because we'll probably see some volatility within the markets. And companies will ebb and flow, but getting 280 out of the equation and shoring up these balance sheets to give a real true picture. Do you think that changes the conversation with talking to, let's say, sophisticated and institutional investors?
Yes, it starts it. And I think we all kind of feel like one of the next moves after rescheduling is probably exchanges can bite in. So, I mean, there will be things that give some investors who really feel like either way, I only need a couple things to invest here. And then I can, again, throw a couple more of the cliches that I love throwing around on CNBC. I mean, you make the most money when things go from terrible to just bad. So a couple of these things happen, more money comes in. But to your point, which is that there's at least some sense of really what like, can we remove the asterisks? And it will be a big deal. It will be a big deal.
Yeah.
And let's be clear, 25 is going to be a story if there ever was one. And I know we've had periods that seem darker than this from a balance sheet perspective. Like, it seems pretty dark overall, but the balance sheet dynamics of like either early COVID or like early Fed hiking cycle as we got into 22. So cost of capital really ballooning higher because it's ballooning higher in real industries, and just, contraction and volatility. I think 25 looks worse for the industry as in terms of balance sheets. And so, once again, I think investors need to be really careful about dilution, and most investors know the obvious, which is, a cheaper share price doesn't mean you have the ability to trade back to the old share price, even if all other things were equal, because in many cases it's not the same balance sheet anymore. So that's
revenue is flat across the board. We continue to see that over and over, right?
No,
I mean, I think there's a handful of the larger multi-state operators that have some balance sheet dynamics that I think people need to pay attention to. And then there are some that actually, I think they're okay. So I think there were some people that really were timed for rescheduling, and it would have worked out real well. But you guys can see what I can see, which is that the market is discounting and is heavily discounting the players that were more concerned about their debt profile than the ones where we're not.
Good point.
Now, I know we want to get into the ETF, but I got to ask one more question. With your emerging markets background, and we are talking a lot about Europe as of recent, how would you define Europe, or what kind of lens are you looking at Europe in regards to their cannabis industry? Would you consider that an emerging market? Would you consider it a mature market with the numbers and the patient growth and what we're seeing there? Or how are you looking at Europe, if at all?
Cannabis thesis? I am, and I guess I think about Europe as just another ingredient in the overall emerging market that's cannabis. And I'll also just say, as much as I might have just sounded a little bit more pessimistic and cynical just now talking about balance sheets and where we might be, there's an element of where we are right now also that makes me feel a lot like I felt at different times in my emerging markets career, which is that the people that are in the industry investing around it are more cynical than the people that are outside of the industry. And therefore, I think there are people that are looking at this industry for the first time that are saying, hey, I understand there's a lot that's not working here, and I understand that there's a lot of macro headlines that need to happen, but that they can see both the progress the industry's made. They can see the companies that are executing. There's a chance to engage here. I kind of feel like this is felt at times when things look so uninvestable that actually the people that are closest to it are missing it. And I think we're there. I think people have been destroyed. Capital's been eviscerated. People are cynical.
One of the things we continue to talk about is how safe banking, the days of it being a standalone vote are over, and how it needs to latch on to, let's say, a crypto bill and a stablecoin bill, and see how that, basically starts to develop. But it was interesting to see during the Senate banking hearing earlier this week about how crypto and cannabis were brought up a number of times by a number of people. Did you get a chance to see that hearing at all?
Yeah, a bit. I didn't watch the hearing, but I saw those headlines coming out.
Yeah, which was interesting. But want to switch our attention now to ETF. And I know last month we got the news, but Amplify ETFs, they liquidated their ETF MJUS on January 27th. Public opinion about most of the holdings being transferred then to your ETF CNBS versus being sold on the open market. So that's one of the main reasons we wanted to have you on here today. So let's, I guess, maybe clear the air. What's, I guess, true and what isn't when it comes to what's being transferred? I see a smile on your face. So I know the online world can be a tricky one at times.
Well, it's great to clarify this, because some of what has played out and transpired, both in terms of the announcements of what was going to happen, and why it happened, and where we are today. I think some of it is just procedural, like ETF land. There are dynamics in terms of notifications and what you have to do in advance of making a change to the prospectus on an ETF and a filing, and how things are played out. a press release that goes out to say that a fund's being liquidated and doesn't say a whole lot more in a very liquid market that's basically trading near its lows, is going to have a lot of a lot of fear attached to it to people that are in the industry, including the companies themselves whose stocks trade. And I heard from a handful of C-suites like what's going on, and mostly because of a process, mostly that I wasn't even able to talk about. Didn't pick up the phone because I knew there was something more that was going on. But ultimately, I'll take a step back and then we'll finish the story. The step back is that we launched CNBS. We and my partner at Amplify ETFs launched CNBS in 2019. We launched it as an active strategy in a global ETF strategy that was intended to get the best exposure for the industry then and what we thought was tomorrow and blah, blah, blah. As the cannabis industry evolved, and you guys know this as well as anybody, I mean, not only the Canada versus US trade, where you could invest, where you couldn't invest, what you could invest in. I mean, for CNBS, we were kind of, dealing with the dynamic of everything from, if ultimately we really want to own mostly US, because this is really where we think the market is,
right?
How do we do that? And we took a very cautious approach to owning swap and what we could do, because I think there was not a lot of clarity around that. So ultimately, we could own swap, we could own US, and ultimately CNBS, as it got into 2020 and 2021, but really in 22, was starting to be able to own US swap as much as we wanted, or certainly enough that gave me the ability as the PM to really be able to invest anywhere I wanted to, which meant I still think it's a global industry. I still think a global allocation is important, but that's where we went, and I think we did well. And I'll let people look at the numbers. I mean, I think we outperformed. I think we never really got the size because I think we were later to the game on what we could do on swap. But somewhere a couple of years ago, Amplify ETFs, who again is a group of guys I've known for a long time, Kristen Magoon, who started Amplify, has a lot of experience in the ETF land, with Claymore, and sold that to Guggenheim, and he's really a talented guy. When we started talking about ETFs, he was on board and he was pretty excited about cannabis. Amplify a couple of years ago ended up buying a company called ETFMG, and they bought it because they had a handful of funds, 7 or 8 or 9 funds that they bought, a couple of them which they were more focused on. What happened to have come along with that purchase were MJ and MJUS. And again, it's not as if they didn't look at the entirety of the fund portfolio of the company they were buying, but and say those were important names too. Obviously, look, MJ from its early days was the original cannabis ETF. Let's call it what it is. And it was, well north of $1 billion. It was on the front end of a lot of those trends. And I give, that group a lot of credit for quickly pivoting a business and turning it into a cannabis ETF at a time cannabis was raging. Anyway, they buy MJ and MJUS, and for a year and a half, we now have 3 cannabis funds, and people are a little confused. Hey, what's going on? And ultimately, really, we were just taking time to both with our new partners and figure out what was the best strategy for putting the most coherent, cohesive, best approach to a cannabis, either suite of products or one product or a couple products. And ultimately, the plan was we were going to fold MJUS, which is US focused cannabis ETF, into CNBS, and leave MJ to exist, more globally and a little more macro. We can talk a little bit about the constituents of MJ, but it at times has taken a little bit more of a macro view in that index. And again, that's a passive strategy. It's index based, but the index methodology around the alternative harvest is, has included some of the exposure to, the bigger CPG that might be in cannabis or might someday be in cannabis, in addition to Canada and US. And as people in the industry know, that MJ was investing through MJUS to get its US allocation. So most of MJUS, if not really, let's just say most of it, was really ownership by MJ, right? And so ultimately, when we decided to say, hey, cannabis, I believe in active management really everywhere, but I get that passive investing has worked, and it's worked in other places. It's worked with the S&P, frankly, for years. So there are passive investors, there are active investors. We decided let's make this message really clear. If you want to invest passively, there's MJ. If you want to invest actively, there's CNBS. I was also named as a sub-advisor and a portfolio manager to MJ. So I now have influence over the process, which helps at least shape that index. But most importantly, a major part of MJ now is CNBS, of which I'm the active manager managing. So to me, it's a really exciting time. It's exciting because one, we have clarified, I think, something that was less than clear. Hopefully, I'm somebody as we talk my history in the industry, I've been looking at this stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'd like to believe I'm going to get stuff right. I'm going to get stuff wrong, but I've been around the cannabis hoop for forever, and I'm an emerging markets investor, and I'm a portfolio manager, and I'm not going anywhere. So I think CNBS with a new mandate and then a role on playing an MJ, and then the suite of products at Amplify, which have a passive and an active product, I think we're really well positioned. And again, MJ at different times in its life is, to me, I scratched my head about some of the things it was investing in, but I'm pretty excited about, the future. I'm really excited.
Is CNBS a global strategy, or is it a US only strategy?
So we made CNBS US only. And I'll say this much because I want to be both true to the spirit and also the filing and the regulatory dynamics here, which is that it's a U.S. fund, which means that I have to hold no less than 80% of the fund in U.S. companies that derive 50% or more of their revenues from cannabis. Now, before we even made this switch on January 27th, CNBS was 83% U.S. So it's not a big change for me. And the fact of the matter is that at least right now, I still have, some of the same positions I had before that are not US. And like them or hate them, some of the Canadian LPs or some of the other places. So, I want to be clear that, we are now, CNBS is now a US fund. But it doesn't really stop me from owning some stuff outside of the US. And at least as the world is right now, I'm where I want to be. I don't think I want to be less than 80% US ever. And I think we know there are going to be really interesting global stories to come up. And I think we'll own them, and MJ certainly will. And as a PM of that fund and a sub-advisor, great. So, it doesn't change my focus across the entire cannabis space, but it definitely, those distinctions are really important to make clear. And we always want to represent that as it is.
Well said. That's a lot more than what the press release outlined, right?
Yeah, there's a lot there, right?
It's better to get it. It's definitely better to get it direct from the source.
I often say this to everybody, though. The new press releases are podcasts, but I'm biased because
that's cool. One more thing I want to point out too is there was some activity at the end of the year at CNBS unrelated to the MJ US and whatnot, is that we paid a huge distribution at the end of 2024, which I'd be lying if I said I was happy about it. But the fund, because it invests in swap, and people that invest in swap in other parts of the world understand how this happens sometimes, which is that the fiscal year for the fund ends September 30. So the fiscal year before that, called Oct 1 to Sep 30. So 23 to 24 was kind of the low tick to the uptick of cannabis around rescheduling. There was the headline in August 23, things went to the moon, then they come back down, and then they start to build as real steps are taking. And then they kind of I mean, it really fell out of bed after the election. But as we know, anyway, so the swaps though in the fiscal year, had income that needed to be paid out. And they, there's different ways to handle swap exposure. You can do it where you can terminate the swap and rewrite it. In the case of these, we did. So, investors who own CNBS got paid 34% of their money, and the fund didn't go down 34%. It was paid out. And I want to make that clear because that was also confusing for people.
Okay.
A case where, taking a little bit of profit in cannabis at the end of the year may not have been a bad idea. Although, I don't know that I want to be cashing out now. I think, one of the things I'm happy to say about the investors in CNBS that really we've had over time is it's actually been pretty stable in terms of the number of creates and the actual, shares outstanding because, frankly, people that want to be in the space have largely stayed in the space.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty sticky money, believe it or not.
Well, we've attended a few events together like over the years, and we always talk about incremental steps. And quite honestly, we're at a stage right now is one small incremental step. And I don't want to say it's small, but not this whole cohesive approach would do wonders for this industry right now because it's just been so beat up over the past 4 years. But, we keep hearing, we had Tyler Berline on last week mentioning how the 500,000 jobs that the industry produces right now is actually not listed on the jobs statisticals report. And this is something that Donald Trump is aware of right now. And I don't want to sway you one way or another when it comes to the political forefront, but for what he stands for and what his campaign is all around, you really hope that economic angle, there's some low hanging fruit that could get him to move. But you mentioned earlier about, we have to be hopeful in the space right now. I think that's the only thing that we can be considering, what's happened over these last couple of years. But let's see.
Look, there's just, again, there's no disputing the role that cannabis has in our country, by the way, and the role it's had in its history. So, I think there's different ways to kind of sell cannabis historically. And I mean, in the last 10 years, and I mean, in DC, and I mean, on Main Street, sometimes a little too much, we're like doing God's work and it's wellness. Sometimes a little too much, frankly, criminal justice, and we're saving the world from, past sins. A little too much. Sometimes this is the next greatest thing. This is going to be better than, pop rocks and, bubblegum, so like there's been so much like hyperbole and, what is cannabis? Like, how do you want to position it? How's it really? The reality is this is a huge industry in this country with a lot of people working and with huge tax dollars at work, with the huge public interest and with largely, the country saying, yes, we either don't care or we're totally in favor. So that's the stuff to be really excited about. I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm going to be investing here for a while.
It's good to know.
The main problem is the social paradigm has shifted, but the regulatory paradigm has not shifted yet.
Exactly.
And is greatly lagging, which is why to catch up, we're basically wearing cement shoes right now, as an industry, unfortunately.
This is where constituents from individual states, if you want to get something changed, roll up your sleeves and make a difference. Because I think if you put pressure on some of these senators, as Gretchen said in your Twitter space yesterday, Anthony, letters may be old fashioned, but they work when they start getting letters to these offices. But before I let you go, I got to ask you, who's your pick Sunday?
Look, I mean, I have a lot of friends that are Eagles fans, even though as a Giants fan, I hate the Eagles. So,
me too.
Let me get that out there. I also need to get out there that the Giants franchise should never be forgiven for letting Saquon Barkley get away. And you know what?
Never.
Not only is it fitting, but because, even if Saquon had 900 yards this year, had 3.3 yards a carry, and, did an okay job.
Yep.
He's a high quality guy. From the moment he walked into the locker room in New York, everybody loved him.
Good
and
point.
The fans loved him.
How old is he?
So, what's that?
How old is he? Is he?
I think he's 28 tops, maybe 27. He's not old.
I was going to say, like, if the Giants drafted a quarterback and got to where they wanted to be in 2-3 years from now, he's still the same player. But but to your point, It's outside of just football. If he walks into a locker room and is well respected, like some of the things that I see and how he's a family man with his kids on the sidelines, like, yeah, he seems like
he's a great dude. It's hard not to root for him, and therefore, I hope he wins the MVP of the Super Bowl trophy.
Yeah.
I mean,
he deserves.
He does.
You could argue he deserved that MVP trophy over Josh Allen.
It's hard not to see. It's hard not to see the Eagles win in this game. I mean,
I hope they win.
It just seems like that this is a team that's peaking at the right time, and
I know,
with an offensive line like that and a defensive line like that, it's
I know
it's not hard to lose. So we'll see.
I thought Dan Campbell was robbed for Coach of the Year last night too. Kevin O'Connell did a great job, but man, Detroit beat them twice head to head. That was a tough.
I hope Jalen Carter has 6 sacks, Saquon rushes for like 200 yards, and they smoke the Chiefs. I want nothing more than to see the Chiefs just get smoked.
I'm
so sick of them.
I was hoping the Lions were in the Super Bowl so we could see Raznick with his big gulps.
America wanted the Lions in the Super Bowl.
I would have loved to have seen Detroit there. I love their uniforms, man.
Yeah,
they're
great.
Cool.
Tim, always great catching up with you. Appreciate obviously the feedback and some clarification regarding your ETF, but more importantly,
really important. Thanks. Appreciate the time.
How you're preparing for the industry heading into this year. But let's keep in touch, and hopefully we'll be down at the stock exchange relatively soon. Again, Anthony and I have been there a few times the last couple of years, and we see you on set. But keep up the great work, and let's keep in touch.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks Tim. Real pioneer, one of the true first investors in the space that took it mainstream, and a class act to say the least.
It was the oh shit moment when Tim was on Fast Money talking about cannabis stocks, and then when Jim Cramer had Bruce Linton on his show on CNBC was when everybody was like, all right, this is serious. I think it was right after Sanjay Gupta had the Charlotte's Web and the big segment on CNN. Then they compounded the momentum, and everybody just was like, cannabis is here. That was the aha moment.
Well, everyone always looks up to somebody in their field, man. As a broadcaster, when that man walks into a room, you have to sit back and just admire who he is, and you learn from people like him. But got a lot of respect for him, as do a lot of people in this industry. So appreciate that. I know we were going to get into the wire, but this man has been waiting patiently, and I think a lot of people want to know and understand what's going on. Let's welcome in Dan from the Chart Guys here on a Friday. Good to see you. I don't want to say Happy New Year because it's been a couple of weeks, but there was really nothing to talk about as far as price action. But that's changed this week, which is welcoming news, don't you think?
Yeah, I've taken my first trades in some cannabis and psychedelic in probably since I sold the vote reaction. So yeah, volatility is back in the short term. It's still a prove it story for the bulls. ACB, it's kind of hard to trust this move just because, again, you go back and look historically, and there's just so many of these spikes that we just get back.
Yes.
And so we just have to see. I mean, essentially what it is it's a lesson in dilution and share structure where, you have companies like this that do the slow bleed forever. And so for the most part, bears are extremely confident and they pile in, and then everybody gets on one side of the boat, and there's something that's just a little spark that's enough to flip the boat. You get a little mini short squeeze, and then that short squeeze marks a longer term top, and then it's just the same slow bleed again. So you just have to know that that's the history of this stock, and you have to see that something is different. It's looking like, we might be topping out temporarily. And so we want to know, what's our retracement size? How much do we give back? Bulls never want to give back more than 50%. So, we do our retracement here, and bulls don't want to fall back down under $5. But again, one time frame at a time. You got to confirm a daily uptrend. You then got to confirm a weekly uptrend, and it takes a long time. So again, nice for traders, nice little wake up action. But in terms of a longer term bottom, is anything shifting? For an ACB perspective, a lot of proving still needs to be done.
Well, I thought was interesting this week with their numbers out of the international markets. So there's some real fundamentals there that back up some of the stuff. But based on the trend, this is telling, to say the least, when you look at it from a broad spectrum and realize if you made some money, this is not investment advice, but you want to understand what's to come next. And this is a clear definition of that. So keeping on the Canadian narrative, let's look at OGI. They have earnings that are coming up on Tuesday, and it's also a stock that's actually performing pretty decent this week as well.
So yeah, when you get a move like ACB, you just get the correlation bleeds off to everything else, and then you have to understand that ACB is now leading the ship in terms of the sector in the short term. And so, a lot of these charts are going to look fairly similar in that regard. The big volume spike, the solid move up, finding, slowing down that bull momentum right now, potentially shaping up daily consolidation. But again, a lot of proving needs to be done. OGI got to get over 177. This is our resistance zone where we topped out 173, 171, 177. And now we just topped out 174. So, more and more, when I first started trading, I used to just draw a support line and a resistance line.
Okay.
And now it's more of a zone. It's a percent here or there, depending on the instrument you're charting. And so, you can break a level by a few pennies or a percent, but that oftentimes, isn't enough. And so this is an example where I've got a resistance zone on OGI from 173 to 177. That has to become support. Otherwise, nothing structurally changes on this chart. So build a base of support, but again, got to break resistance.
So for those still trying to learn, when you look at that 173 to 177, what needs to actually break through? How does that happen? What needs to happen?
So you want to have high volume. And again, we had high volume, just not enough. And then the key is the back test. You will find so often that when something is going to break out and follow through, you break the level, and then you come back and you back test it and you hold the previous resistance as support, and then you see continuation. And there's just so many examples, just off the top of my head, silver on a longer term time frame, it had this way back when. This is the weekly chart. This was a resistance zone at $26. You break above it, and here we go. Nope, you got a back test. You hold it as support, and then it's time to go. And so it's the break, the back test and hold, and continuation.
Well, well explained. You did bring up the idea of ACB kind of leading the pack and everything kind of bleeds out accordingly. But I did look at, I don't know how Tilray's doing this morning, but I was a little surprised to see them continuing to slide as other players are actually performing well. But this is telling.
Yeah, it is. And again, that's when you look at the way a leader, and again, leader just in the sense that it's the headline leader for this week.
Yes,
yeah, exactly. So it gives you information. If something were outperforming ACB, we'd say this is clearly a good thing. This is standing out. And it's the same thing. We're going to talk about CYBN and psychedelics in just a bit. And it's the same thing as Tilray, where it should be trading, 120, 125 right now and doing what the other names are doing. And it is not. And that is a red flag. That is a bearish correlation. And if I'm not in a bear position, but I just imagine that I am loving this price action on TLRY in response to what ACB did.
Interesting. Let's switch now to psychedelics and psychedelic ETF PSIL, which has done nothing but incredible in the last little bit here. But I think based off of this rumored appointment with RFK being appointed as the head of the HHS has a lot to do with it as well. But there is some growing sentiment regarding this space, which is welcoming news.
Yeah, and there was a double whammy, and the ticker's not burned into my head just yet. I forget it off the top of my head. It starts with a G. There's an R in there. Anyways, they came out with
GH Research.
Yes, thank you. They came out with positive phase 2 results. That was a boost for the sector into RFK Jr.'s probability of HHS, the head of the HHS. That increased significantly as well. And so it was a little double whammy. And the sector
closed Monday at a little over $10 and opened up at over 19 on Tuesday morning, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it was a monster move. It was up 90% pre-market. I remember looking at it that day. And what? We have to be cautious of a sell the news event. The more confident the market gets that RFK Jr. is going to be approved, the more the market prices it in advance. And, sometimes we get short-term sell the news events. Bitcoin with the ETF was an example. We run up into the ETF the day of the launch. We then dump 20%, but then the actual ETF buying gives us a huge leg up. So when I say sell the news, I am just referring to short-term, but it is just something we have to be aware of because markets are forward-looking, and the higher the probability of an event, the more it has already been priced in. But with regards to the ETF, your PSIL, I keep an eye on it, but again, the volume, it still trades like $300,000 a day. And one of the reasons that I am keeping a close eye on the psychedelic sector is because it hasn't had the monster run in the terms of popularity that cannabis has seen many times over the years. And, we saw the introduction of MSOS, and, it's a love-hate relationship with people where they love it when we're going up and they hate it when we're going down.
Yes.
And that's going to be what happens with the Bitcoin ETF. Just wait for the first Bitcoin bear market, and everybody's going to hate that ETF. But, if you see dollar volume coming into this thing, it can move the underlying stocks. It's trading $300,000 a day. Give me $3 million a day, and then it'll start having an impact. So that's something I'm always watching for. Can the dollar volume start actually coming in here? The answer is still no. And, it's made nice gains off the lows, but we've got to get over. So there's 1572 resistance. Again, we broke it by a few pennies, but not enough just yet. But really, I just have to have the dollar volume come in for this ETF to be impactful on the sector, start buying some of the underlyings, help them ramp up. And that will happen if we get the sexy headline and we get the social media fervor, but we don't have it yet.
I know. One of our guests that was on earlier this week, he's an options trader. He thought, I think it will, as far as the industry moving at some point this year, but we need spec money to come back more broadly into the market first. That's probably a good way of looking at things, but that appointment would help. But moving on from this ETF, I want to look at two players that have actually done well this week. First up, I think we have is MindMed, who everybody loves this company based on a lot of the research that they're focusing on right now, but it's had a very good week.
Yeah, it has. I mean, we've given back half this move, more than half. So again, it's a little bit more than bulls want to see.
Today?
This is today's candle.
Oh, wow. Got ahead of myself.
So when you give back 50% plus of the move, the most likely scenario is still a daily higher low. But again, that's when we look for the tightening range as opposed to continuation. And I did not have a lot of clarity on this chart beforehand. And so I was just watching, these trend lines as a bit of a visual guide. So maybe we have to come back and back test it. But again, it was a nice move up, but we're still seeing a good bit of resistance in the $9 range here, where if we just draw 10 psychological essentially, but upper $9 range, you can see where we've topped out, back here, and then we top out here. And again, we poke over it, but we can't hold it, and we dip back below again. So it is still a resistance zone to watch right around that $10 level. And, their name's holding up a little bit better than MNMD, but anticipating, I wouldn't anticipate this to be a sell the news event. Getting some rumors, maybe next week we're going to get the RFK Jr. vote, maybe Wednesday. I don't know if there's any validity to that, but this is the kind of price action where I'd say I wouldn't expect a sell the news event because it's already selling off the last couple of days.
All right, Atai, how much is it given back? Because I think it was up, but I saw it down. Yeah, I hear
not nearly as much. And ATAI has been the way that I've been playing this name. And just little flips. I sell yesterday 240s. I rebuy yesterday, end of the day 205. Again, I cannot stress enough, if you are trading these names, just take some off a little bit into strength. We are counter long-term trends. And it's, if I'm in at $2 and I can sell half at 225, my break even is now 180 or 175, and I'm now way more comfortable. And we just have to ensure that we're just trimming a little bit to ensure that we stay in full control. Because again, the last thing we want to do is just bag hold these things, as many people have learned. And so again, we're going to look for a daily higher low to be the result of this consolidation. And the breakout here is a little bit more convincing for me. But again, if there was a beautiful tightening pattern, and if this move is going to be for real, and again, we put up the highest share count volume ever on one of these breakout days. And if this move is going to be for real, we will back test and hold the 190s, which was previous resistance. We've now broken above it. You've got to hold that back test to progress in an uptrend. And just one more note on volume. Again, we obviously know with US cannabis not being listed on the higher exchanges, when ACB had that reaction, it was putting up $350 million of volume in that day. And, TCNNF $35 million is huge volume. So again, we've said it 150,000 times, but we've got to see access to trading capital being listed on higher exchanges if these things are going to be able to get any kind of meaningful momentum behind them.
Yeah. Well, like Tilray in cannabis, we when I want to switch to Cybin, it's lagging, as some of the people have written here, but wonder why.
It's again, I like to keep things simple. This was a beautiful equilibrium. Again, ATAI had a weekly equilibrium. It broke bull and got followed there. This was the perfect setup to break bull. And we broke bull and we gave it all back. And that first day, instantly red flag. So to answer your question, why? Let's keep it simple. Someone is selling a lot. That's it. That's what's happening. Someone is selling a lot of shares into that bull momentum, and it's leading to supply outweighing demand. And when, again, it's the same exact thing. There are definitely red flags that this is the price action that is taking place while the rest of the sector is doing almost the opposite. And so, again, if I really wanted to know, I'd read the balance sheet. I'd look at what their convertible debt situation is. I'd look at whose, convertible debt shares became free trading sometime in the last 6 months, but I just don't care enough. I can just keep it simple. Someone is selling and we're going down because of it. And it is glaringly, this is why watching sector peers is so important. If I watch this chart on its own, okay, I see weakness, but it doesn't glaringly stand out unless I compare it to the peers.
Okay. All right. Good to know. All right. That wraps it up. But the big takeaway, when you look at the cannabis leader of the week, ACB, the big takeaway again is?
The big takeaway is follow through. You get this cascading effect of a little short squeeze. And then once that top is hit, that's it. And, you give it back for months and months. Prove that this time is different. Set a higher low into continuation and follow through with trend changes. Because if you don't, it's just going to be another slow bleed again.
Right. No GI's resistance is at $1.73, if I remember correctly. Yes.
173 to 177 zone. Yep. Break above it, back test and hold it as support. And that will be a big step forward. And we'll say, okay, things are progressing on the chart for the bulls, but still that hurdle that has to be gotten over. All
right, sir. By the way, before I let you go, how's things back at your homeland? I know you guys got hit by the hurricane and it's been before Christmas since we spoke to you last, but are things, hopefully, I assume they're improving, but how much?
They are. They're still doing the cleanups, and there's still a bunch of trash and little areas that are looking like a war zone. Honestly, it's the economic impact where it's a big tourist destination and restaurants are being hit hard, and which restaurants are going to survive and who's shutting down, and that's the biggest concern at this point. But we're getting there. I'm still chipping away. I'm working on my last downed tree in the yard after chopping up.
How many trees did you have knocked down?
I had 10 down. I've only had to move maybe 5 or 6 of them, but you get an appreciation for the size of a tree when you have to move it literally limb by limb and then chainsaw it and then chop it with an axe.
Oh, I hear you.
So I love the work, but it's definitely a lot.
Oh, man. Well, listen, glad to hear you doing all right. And most importantly, glad to have you back on here today. And let's hope we can keep this consistent again, because it was a nice week to see some price action. And as I said earlier, there just wasn't much going on, but all is well as we move forward. And we will be in touch with you next week and see you next week. Okay, sir?
Sounds good. Have a good one, guys.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Bring back AV. I don't know if you got a chance to see some of those charts, but all made sense. All made sense. I know there's a few things that we want to touch in. I know we're around, what are we at? 57 minutes.
About an hour. I fully agree with Dan on Aurora. I was planning to buy puts on it next week, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah.
On the move. I would be very, very surprised if it doesn't give up some in the next couple months.
Yeah. Let everybody know as well. We've reached out to Canopy. I know they had their latest earnings announced this morning with their new CEO, Luke Mongo. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, but talked a little bit on the earnings call. He's got 25 years experience in the CPG industry, worked for Weston Foods, Procter & Gamble. He's led product innovation and believes that cannabis is one of the most exciting consumer trends moving forward. And talked about this, was it 74 million in net revenue? I didn't get a chance to see all that much, but 70 net revenue is 74 million for the quarter, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
74.8, down 5% quarter over or year over year.
Year over year.
Yeah.
Storz and Bickel sales remain strong. Gross margins decreased by 400 basis points to 32% in Q3 F1 2025 compared to a year ago. And again, that was because the Storz and Bickel continue to have some strong sales. What else did I see? Operating loss from continuing operations was 24 million in Q3, with the main factor being attributed to the reduction of operating expenses. An adjusted EBITDA loss of 3 million in Q3, representing a 61% year-over-year improvement. So as we continue to say, and we've had interviews with David over the past year, like, look, it's not the numbers that everybody wants to see still. However, it is an improvement from a year ago. And that's kind of like the sentiment that we've kind of communicated to people. But no, I'm not going to try. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
It's not an improvement from a year ago. Revenue is down, like we said, 5% year over year.
But operating costs and other things have definitely improved year over year, yes. But I'm not going to like sugarcoat this. Like, there are some things that we want to learn from Luke, because there's still a lot of work that needs to be done here. But that's the most important thing, because I know there's some investors that have reached out, and people ask us continuously when he's going to be on. But we have reached out this morning, and I don't think it's next week, but the week after, around the middle to third week of February is what we're trying to aim to have Luke on to find a little bit more. But
I'm looking forward to getting Mr. Jorgensen on to talk about Canopy USA, with what's going on under the hood with Canopy USA, because I feel like that is the growth engine for them moving forward, especially with the Wana brand.
Pivotal moment, as Tim said, for this industry in 2025, that we continue to talk about. Elsewhere, I know that we wanted to bring up, there's a story that Tom announced this morning on Marijuana Moment regarding Russell Vought, and he's being appointed as the director of the OMB under this Trump administration. And I don't know a lot about him, other than the fact that he's obviously not a great positive component for the cannabis space right now. But I'm just reading a little bit about him. Did you?
I think he's neutral. I don't think anybody needs to pay attention to him.
You think he's neutral?
Honest. I mean, he's neutral. Well, I think he called cannabis a gateway drug, but I'm saying that he's neutral in terms of the process that we're going into. The only person that matters here is Donald Trump and Pam Bondi.
Okay,
that's it.
So just
moving forward. Yes, he called cannabis a gateway drug. Yes, he's the architect of Project 2025. There's a lot of shit that we could sit here and say about him. He's not going to be able to veto rescheduling. He's not going to be able to augment rescheduling. He is a pawn in the process. It is Pam Bondi and Donald Trump that matters.
Well, I'm glad I brought it up, because that's pretty much all it needs to be said about it. And we continue to say that over and over and over from the people that we've spoken to with. It's pretty much down to Donald Trump, which actually is not a bad thing, because it's like one person can make a decision on the fate of an entire industry right now and where it goes. And that'll be interesting. Last thing we want to talk about is a branding problem that the cannabis industry has. And I know this is going to be an interesting one, but there is some stuff circulating online in the Twitterverse regarding Varrell Holdings. And if I bring this up real quick, what's the gentleman's YouTube channel that we were talking about here?
Goblin is what he goes by. I thought it was interesting. I mean, he basically shredded them in his response. I don't know who the marketing manager was that sent that email. I would love to talk to their marketing department, though, on what the strategy was for having Varrell's brand associated with somebody that posts videos about how he takes Xanax, how he gets DUIs, how he overdoses on drugs, how he rates drugs on a yearly basis. The branding aspect of this makes no sense to me. I mean, I think cannabis companies need to have a little bit of more tact protecting the shield and the corporate image of the company. Yeah, I guess it makes sense that he's got a large audience, he gets views, but this might be just hyperbole and just very anecdotal, but those kind of channels are aggregating people that are buying from the black market. Those kind of channels are aggregating people that are buying.
How old is he?
Hemp-derived, I'm not sure. Hemp-derived THC products from gas stations. Those channels are not aggregating people that are going to be walking into dispensaries for the most part. And if I'm Varrell, I don't want my brand associated with creators like that. There's plenty more pools of people online that have channels that have integrity in them that I would want the shield of my brand being next to. Not someone that's talking about getting high on Xanax, or someone that's talking about inhaling a mushroom vape and getting high off his ass. Like, it just makes absolutely no sense. And you got what you kind of were asking for. They reached out to somebody that has absolutely no interest in corporate cannabis, has no interest in being associated with a regulated industry, and they got put on blast for it in a complete thread about their New York operations. I don't want to see any other MSOs going towards channels like that to brand. To me, it makes absolutely no sense. You are discounting your brand, cheapening your brand, and it's not really someone that I would want the legal regulated cannabis industry associating with, especially if I was a shareholder. If I was a shareholder and I saw that that's where they were advertising, that would piss me off.
Arns, do you have any like clapping sound effects in the background? That was like an AV rant that was so spot on. Play some clapping background music if you can, Arns. But I'm 100% in agreement with you on that. I know there's restrictions on branding opportunities for the space, but let's face it, there is a stigma challenge that this industry has in an uphill battle. And the last thing we want is associating with brand, like you said, with that kind of stuff. It's like you've already got a tough enough road ahead of you to try to change the whole narrative on the stigma of cannabis and what we've been used to.
Yeah.
Arns,
that was the first thing I saw this morning, logging onto my computer, and I just started laughing. I was like, you guys got exactly what was coming to you. Like, what did you think he was going to say?
Yeah. I'm going to read actually this. This is from the Varrell marketing team. Actually, no, I won't go there.
Yeah,
I won't go there.
I think we made our point.
Yeah. But good points to say least. I think our producer is not being able to find any background noise or claps, but I would have liked that. But anyway, I think that wraps up for today. We got an hour and 5 minutes in. What a great week we've had for guests. And we're trying to get Eric Berlin from Denton's on. I know he's traveling down to a trade show right now. Big trade show going on in Miami, if I'm correct, right now.
It's over today. I think it was a half day. It's over today. It's focused on cannabis beverages.
Okay.
It's more so, I think, like a boutique data conference. It's the first conference I haven't been able to get into.
Just invite only. But how you
apparently it's literally the first conference. It's literally the first conference that I've not been able to get into. Brady emailed them for me saying that he's a good friend. Like, Brady was on a panel and crickets from them. So whatever the Canada conference is going on in Miami, good for you guys. But it seems like it's pretty hot ticket in town.
Huh. Interesting. Next week, next Wednesday, we're going to have Bina Goldenberg from OGI on to talk about their earnings. That's coming out on Tuesday. Thought it was interesting, too, that Dan highlighted Tilray. That seems to be lagging behind against some of these other companies. But
I mean,
there's some eye-opening. There's some questions,
Let's not forget that Tilray still trades at $1 billion valuation.
True.
Like, Tilray's, I'm not saying it's priced for perfection. I'm not saying it's undervalued. Tilray's trading at $1 billion value market cap right now. The reason why its share price is 96 cents and it's trading at $1 billion market cap is because of the dilution. Am I getting the hook right now?
No, I'm just teeing up the music because we're about to finish this show off, but it's kind of like Friday. By the way, let all you people know, guess what? I brought this music up because a week from today, it's the return of Mic Drop with Guap. He's coming back. He'll have his first mic drop of 2025 coming up a week from today. So for all you people wanting out there, where is Guap? Guap's right here in 7 days from now. That's all I care about. Anyway, good week for the most part. And at the meantime, as I usually say, scan that QR code. Make sure to subscribe to our Baked In newsletter. Got a recap of the biggest highlights of the week in cannabis that's going live here on our channel at 8 o'clock Sunday evening. If you haven't done so, as I say here on the outro every time, please subscribe to our channel. We want to grow, build this.
Yeah.
AV, appreciate all your time, and we'll see you back here Monday at 4 o'clock.
Yep. See you guys.
Now that was a good one. What'd you guys all think? Did you like what we had to say here today? Do you agree, disagree with what we're saying? Love to get your feedback. As usual, leave comments below. Trade to Black is growing, and we wouldn't have done it without you. So if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check us out on Apple and Spotify for the audio version. And as usual, leave lots of comments. We, as I said, love to hear back from you. Thanks again, everybody, for watching.